Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to our second school board candidate forum. Education obviously is such a critical topic right now, so I really appreciate you taking some time out of your evenings to learn more about these candidates and major issues facing JCPS right now. So tonight we're going to hear from the 3 District 5 candidates running to represent South Central Louisville. We'll start with some quick introductions, then I have some questions for the candidates. We're hoping to save the last 20 minutes or so for audience questions, so please be thinking about what you want to ask. It's not required to ask anything, but it helps me out and it helps you get your questions answered. So I'm going to give each candidate about a minute to introduce themselves and say why they're running for school board. So we'll start right here with Mr. Singleton and work our way down.
Hello, my name is Matt Singleton. I am a pastor, I am a tutor, and I also work at the greatest hotel in Jefferson County, Holiday Inn, East Hurstbourne. And basically, the points I want to get across is I want to say no to indoctrination. I want to say no to high taxes and wasteful spending. I want to say yes to raising our standardized test scores. And I want to say yes to school safety.
Well, I'm Linda Duncan, and for the past 16 years, I've represented District 5 on the school board. And after having served for 21 years as a classroom teacher at Fairdale High School and Southern High School, and then coming back to Fairdale High School as assistant principal. So I bring that real experience with me in this position. You know, I'm committed to safely operating our schools so that we protect our kids from armed threats. I'm committed to reducing behaviors that are harmful to others right now that are happening. Committed to closing achievement gaps among all our groups. I'm committed to addressing our shortages with creative solutions, staff shortages, and I'm committed to improving our attendance among our kids that are chronically absent. So that's what you get. That's what I'm going to be focused on for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening. My name's Greg Pacetti, and I am a retired JCPS school teacher, newly retired. I just retired this last February. And I've served in various capacities throughout Jefferson County. I started as a substitute teacher way back in the early 90s. And then I was an instructor too, and then classroom teacher, teaching mostly technology, but also social studies. And during my years, especially as a technology teacher, I had the opportunity to visit just about every school in JCPS, and over the last years, more specifically in District 5. And I've talked to a lot of teachers, I've seen a lot of different classroom settings, and throughout the years, the problems have remained the same. And one of the biggest problems is behavior of students in school discipline, or lack thereof. And that's bleeding over into just about every area of school, including school safety and including academic achievement. So that's the area that I want to focus on. I have the experience, I have a PhD in education. I've been around JCPS a lot, and I really think that at this point in my life and in my career, I could really help out and change things that I wasn't able to change as a teacher.
All right, it's question time. So everyone is going to get the same question. You all get an opportunity to answer. I will start with Board Member Duncan this time, and we'll continue on that path, alternating with each question. We do have a lot of questions, so please stay focused and try to stay under 90 seconds, but I won't break out a timer. I want to start with something that all of you have brought up already tonight, school security, which has been a major debate in JCPS for years. The district recently added some armed security officers and in-school safety administrators. Are you happy with how JCPS has handled its piece of school security, and what changes would you like to see, both in terms of hardening school security and addressing the root causes of behavior issues?
Well, the main thing that I'd like to see is us be able to expand our force beyond the officers that we have right now. We're aiming for 30 at the end of this year. I would like to be able to expand that, and I think from the information I have watched, they have made a dramatic, I think they've made a dramatic impact already, because we don't call LMPD now unless it's something beyond that, and we're able to manage the situations ourselves. Our trained officers are. So I'm very pleased with that direction, and I'm hopeful that the expansion of that force will allow all schools to have immediate protection in case of a threat. Our officers are not involved in discipline issues. They are involved in situations of immediate threat or armed threat in particular. So I'm very pleased with what I've seen so far and look forward to the growth of that.
Can you hang on to your questions until question time for the audience, please? Oh, okay. Okay. What is happening?
Closer to the mic? Okay. Well, let's see. The question was on school safety. And school safety encompasses a couple different areas. One area involves the police officers, and that's protecting the students from mostly armed threats. Threats, whether it's students themselves or other people coming from outside. It is, or it should be comforting to know that there is a police officer nearby that can handle the situation, because the school security guards in most cases are not up to that task if there was some kind of real threat. The other aspect of school safety touches on what I was mentioning earlier about student behavior and student discipline. In the schools, we've got a huge problem with students running amok in the schools and causing disruption in the school, and the schools can't do anything about it. There's students there who want to learn, there's teachers there who want to teach, but neither can do what they came to do in the school, which is learn and teach, because we've got students that are disrupting classrooms. If a student or a teacher is having to deal with discipline problems 50% of the time, that means your students there, the ones you sent to get an education, can't get that education because of the disruptions. And that's a huge problem. It also bleeds into other areas like attrition of teachers and academic performance in general. So yeah, I want to address the behavior issue of students. Hopefully that was under 90 seconds.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So as I said, I've worked a little over the last year or so doing tutoring, and you really notice it. You really notice how if a child is distracted, their IQ just stops almost immediately. And as soon as they are relaxed and focused, and that should be a big word, focused, then all of a sudden, you know, their natural mind takes over and they can just zip through their work. But also, there's something I noticed from another candidate in another race, Charlie Bell. She talked a lot about a preparation time, perhaps a preparation time for focusing on behavior, maybe the first week of school, and I thought that was a great idea. I think there's a little bit of concentration from kind of two opposite ends. You know, there's a lot of questions about like the ROTC program. I've seen it to be very successful. Others asked about you know, pacifism and stuff. I was taught, you know, to believe that, like, you know, you turn the other cheek, and it would be good to, you know, make sure students do have, you know, a capable self-control, you know, that we're not always kind of rushing into things when it comes to violent activities and all that kind of stuff. So I'm agreeing a lot of this. I think I'm glad to hear that, like, everybody does want to, you know, make sure that our kids are safe.
Awesome. How's the audio? Is it good? Okay. All right. So next question, we're going to start with you, Greg. Over the last year, JCPS has seen a wave of teacher resignations, higher rates of teacher burnout, and lower educator morale overall. Combined with fewer people entering the classroom already, this has worsened an already lingering teacher shortage. What ideas have you heard from teachers to improve retention or recruitment that you would push for as a school board member?
I'll go back to what I mentioned a couple times already, and that's student discipline. Back when I started teaching, the actual first year back in the early 90s when I applied to be a teacher, I actually couldn't get a job because I went to the office of employment in JCPS and they said they have a stack this high of applications for teachers. And I was a new person who had just gotten my certificate, and they said, you got to wait in line. We have the opposite problem today, where we have hundreds of unfilled vacancies. And the common theme that I've heard all throughout my 27 years of teaching, and over that, just in JCPS in general, is student discipline. The students, or the teachers rather, are burned out because they can't do what they came to do. They had this rosy vision of teaching students when they became a teacher, and they can't do it because of discipline issues. It's a huge problem. Teachers have the highest attrition rate of any profession that there is, because within the first 5 years, the teacher says, like, forget it, I can't handle this anymore. I can't do what I came to do. I can't do what my passion is. So we need to get a hold of student discipline, and it's almost too late because the reputation's out there. It's going to take years to rebuild and get a reputation that the schools are a safe place for teachers to teach, and it's a good profession. So we're going to work on that, but we have to tackle the problem first.
The teachers that I've got to talk to privately, they are very nervous. They have to deal with, sometimes frets from the school system itself for them to perform a certain way or to indoctrinate or different issues. Then there's also, if a kid gets criminally violent, and this idea that, well, we need to keep a kid around and, if they're criminally violent. No, I'm sorry, I came out of JCPS when it was zero tolerance, and you just don't put up with that. Now, there's other things that kind of go on with that, but generally, we need to keep the safety of our kids, the safety of our teachers. There's a group that I talked with earlier this year that really, I think, would be helpful in our county, and that is Kentucky Academic Professional Educators. And by the way, I'm not speaking for them professionally on any means, but I know that they have a policy that's up to $2 million, and basically, teachers need to have that protection. I've also heard cases where, sometimes they're dealing with kids, and, I've worked with a lot of mentally disabled people, but, sometimes there are risks, especially if you talk to, teachers that are just not, they're older in their life and they're easily hurt. And, so they need to, have people watching their back and careful of protecting them.
Well, as a former high school assistant principal, I dealt with discipline. That was my job. That's what I did, more than anything else. And I can tell you, for me, it was following the discipline code. We had a code that we enforced, and that we had administrators who backed us when we had to do the things that we had to do with them. And I think today what's happened is we don't have the backing of the administration the way that we used to, because people are worried about numbers, and they're worried about suspension numbers, and so they don't, and they're also concerned about why kids are acting out, and lots of things related, a lot of mental health issues surrounding the behaviors that we're seeing today. So I think there is a huge effort to try and keep kids in school as much as possible, not draw on suspension the way that we used to be able to, because we had parents at home who supported what we did. And today we don't even have the parents at home to be able to support and correct the kids. So discipline is changing, and what we have to figure out is how we can continue to serve them academically, but hold them accountable for the actions. and make sure that there are visible consequences. And that's what our administrators feel uncertain about. And I think Dr. Polio needs to be very intentional about letting our principals, or let all of our administrators know that we do intend to hold kids accountable for behavior. The consequences don't have to be suspension. There are other methods that can be carried out that will make a child not want to repeat whatever he did. And I've talked to several principals who are using those methods right now. But I think training of our principals is huge right now, because they have to be the ones to support our staff. If they don't support our staff, we can't keep our staff. And I think really that's one of the big contributing factors to our shortages of bus drivers as well as teachers. But I do think that is an administrator issue that has to be handled and taken care of, and they have to be taught to support our staff and what that looks like, so that teachers are not overwhelmed and feeling abandoned.
And somewhat of a follow-up here, we've had a lot of talk of discipline. What is one or two specific changes that you'd like to implement that would be, in your eyes, a step toward improving the current status of the discipline system? Let's start with Matt.
Well, I think one of the major things is that we need to be respectful and supportive of parental autonomy and encourage parents to discipline as they see fit. Obviously there's a lot of things going there, but I think also, as I said, when we got to the higher discipline, you do have that issue of, keeping them a threat inside the school. I believe they can, we can go ahead and suspend people. And also, we do have the Zoom technology now, and, we can help kids to keep up even if they're being disciplined. I think another thing is just, the idea of making sure that we've got a good focus on attention. And sometimes we have environments to set aside that just don't do that, And so, if you do have like a loud and rowdy classroom, then it just becomes so hard, to get things focused. You'll spend all time trying to get people to get your attention, and before you know it, you can't even get the curriculum across because you've been spending so much time on that. That's why I liked Charlie's idea.
Well, I'm all for creating a facility or a setting where we can remove kids who do harm to other people and keep them, if we can, keep them in the same building, but also provide the mental health and the mental health support that they need, and the counseling that they need, and the corrective action that they need in terms of whatever that happens to be. I know some principals have devised what they call a restorative room, where those students are removed, and there has to be a separation. When kids disrupt, when kids harm others, there has to be a separation, and they have to be taken someplace else away. And then at that point, the intervention can start. We can have the support from the counselors and from the mental health personnel that we have. But the student also needs to understand that there now has to be some corrective work that will be done before that student can return to join the rest of the class. And that student has to also be responsible for assignments. If we leave them alone, if we suspend them and say, go home and do this and work on your computer, it didn't work during NTI. If they don't have a parent who's there to make sure that they do the work, then it doesn't get done. So if it's possible to keep them in the facility where they can be supervised and where that work can be done, then we won't suffer the penalty, the academic penalty that happens from suspension. But the world has changed. Our parents sometimes are not able to support us, and they're not able to get control of their own kids even. And so depending on them to do the corrections is really becoming difficult for schools. So I do think that we need to create the facilities where we can separate those kids and treat them and provide our own ways for them to earn their way back into the rest of the program.
Okay, so school safety is probably the biggest thing that's the underlying issue. And when you have discipline problems in the school, it disrupts everybody. Everybody sends their school or their child to a school to learn. That's why we have such a problem with people leaving JCPS and either homeschooling or going to a private school because they want to separate their child from all the chaos and disruptions that are going on in the schools and in the classrooms. And this is not something new. It's not just something that happened in the last few years. It's just been going on for a decade or more where we've had serious problems. And we need to immediately, well, okay, they're kids. So kids are going to make mistakes. The people I'm talking about are the perpetual behavior problems. And they need to be separated from the rest of the students so the rest of the students feel safe walking the halls, being in class, and then the teachers can teach. So I agree with separating the students, especially the problem behavior students, and not abandoning them. I mean, they're still students and they're still kids, and you don't give up on kids. So you've got to make sure that you've got programs, as was mentioned before, that are going to help, I hate to use the word rehabilitate the kids, but get them back on the right path and back towards academic success. It's imperative that we come up. Alternative schools are a good option, but there needs to be many different options for many different students depending on what the reason, the underlying cause of their disruption, whether it's mental disorder or whether it's just they don't want to be there, they're going through something. You know, we have mental health professionals that can really help them out and hopefully get them on the right track. But we also need to start looking back at vocational programs again. Students are required to be in school till they're 18. There's a lot of kids who don't want to be there. And part of the reason why they have discipline problems is because they don't want to be there. If we had a good vocational program where we can say to these kids, you know what, instead of going to school, you're just going to go to a job and work kind of like a journeyman or an apprentice. And guess what? You'll get paid because you're working. And you're going to work with a professional under the guidance and supervision of one of the teachers from JCPS. And I think that would go a long way to solving a lot of the problems. And plus give these people employable skills. The story I always like to tell is is if you ever saw The Wizard of Oz, at the end of the movie, the wizard is giving gifts to all the people, and he gives the Scarecrow a diploma. And suddenly the Scarecrow's like, oh, E equals MC squared. Like he's brilliant because he got the diploma. If you're shoveling kids through and just giving them a diploma at the end, the diploma becomes nothing. It means nothing to them. It means nothing to employers. But if you give a child a skill that they can actually make a living on, that makes a difference.
Do you have something to say?
I think one big difference I want to put here is that behavior is very important and very important to education. But I don't believe that's the end-all, be-all. I believe that we can say if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but it is broke. I believe that the text materials are below, they're inferior. When we look at the standardized testing scores, we're very low here in Jefferson County. And, they've been shifting numbers, but essentially I was at an African-American church here just last New Year's, and I put it to them like this. I said, if your elementary school kids are graduating with a 30% of your elementary school kids are graduating literate from elementary school. If only 30% of them are graduating at that level, is that acceptable to you? And they said, no. I said, well, actually, that's not the black kid's score. That was the white kid's score. Okay? They're all failing. They're all going down. There was a good example of a group that got rid of the current curriculum. And I think it really starts at Common Core, but it's been festering for years. But Goose Rock Elementary, they changed their scores from those low 20s, and in a year, they got them up into the 90s. And, if you get good curriculum, then you'll get, a whole lot better. So I don't want to sit there and put it on the weight of the teachers and the students. I'm not saying they don't have problems. Everybody's got their own piece of the blame, whether it's the families, whether it's the schools, whatever. But the fact is that the curriculum issue has to be addressed. And when I'm dealing with like tutoring, and we're talking about the kids in the county schools and their math scores, and then when they come over here, and when they find out their math scores are bad, but yet they're at a B level and the elementary school has pushed them on, okay, that ain't right, okay? We can't just hide it and then wait till college comes. Because only 40% of the people who are graduating from our high schools are actually getting through college. What about the 60?
All right. Well, I will let the other two candidates respond just generally to a question that was on the list, very similar to what Matt was talking about. What changes would you advocate for to boost overall academic achievement in District 5 schools, specifically looking at achievement gaps?
Well, first of all, we must remember our schools are not like you're imagining their schools used to be. I looked at the percent of what our population's made up of, and half of our schools, or all of our schools, half of their populations are kids learning English in District 5 right now. At least half of the population of many of our schools are just trying to learn English. So when you start talking about scores and putting scores together, our kids who are not on free and reduced lunch are earning, they're at 60 to 65% proficient, which means they score 80% or better on reading and math. It's the gap that we have with the kids who are on free and reduced lunch. It's a poverty gap. Those scores come in at 35% proficient. You put those together, you add those together, you get an average. It's very meaningless in this day of diverse schools that we have. I think we have to start early, preschool, universal pre-K. I would be a big fan of. Right now we have about 2,000 to 3,000 kids in preschool. This achievement gap starts early. All achievement starts early in deficiencies. And if we can get them early and build more preschool centers, build more newcomer centers, have small class sizes with our preschools, and attack this problem early, then we can support our kids so that they do become better and stronger early academically. Right now with 2,000 to 3,000 in preschool, I think we're about 46% kindergarten ready. But that's having about half of our kids in preschool. So 46% is not a surprising number. The real accomplishment comes at the end of kindergarten when we have 98% ready to go to first grade. So I think you have to be careful about painting everybody with the same brush on this. We have schools that have tremendous challenges, and right now our big effort is to fund our schools according to the needs of their students now, rather than by formula where everybody gets equal amount of money based on the number of kids. Now it's on who are you serving, and some populations need more than others, and it's up to us to provide the funding to allow for the support that those kids need to move proficiently through school or to increase their proficiency.
Okay, so the achievement gap is not something new. It's something that the district, and not only in JCPS, but districts across the country have been trying to address for decades. So we've tried a lot of the solutions that have been talked about, and there's still that gap. In fact, when I did my PhD research, it was on computer technology and addressing the achievement gap. And even with the use of technology, aided instruction, the gap still remained. So we've tried just about everything that we can, except for a few things. I've noticed over the years of teaching, and it's becoming even more increasingly evident to me, that a lot of the curriculum, as was mentioned earlier, is not focused on what we're testing. So we need to get back to the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and stop with all the other silliness that are going on in schools. There was Vince Lombardi. I don't know if any football fans out there might remember him. He was a football coach in the 1960s, and his team lost the playoffs. And so the next season, he gets back into the locker room with the players, and he holds up a football and says, "Gentlemen, this is a football." So the message was, we're missing some of the fundamentals. We're missing some of the basics. And I think that's a big problem with JCPS. We're trying to do too many things, and we're forgetting about the basics. And the achievement gap, in part, could be addressed by that if we stop messing around with all the things on the periphery. Another thing I noticed about the curriculum is that if you look at a lot of classes, what they're teaching now, especially, and this is really in the last 10 years, it's become a litany of things that are wrong with America. So if you're teaching U.S. history, for example, and you go through the curriculum and you go through the questions that they want you to teach about the students, it's all about America did this people are racist, this are so-and-so. So it's not surprising by the time you get that student in high school, he doesn't even want to be there because the teachers are racist, the system's racist, the system's rigged against them. There's, no matter what race, the system's against them, and they check out. So to them, it's not worth even studying. So if you can't win, why bother? Why play the game? And so we need to address that and start highlighting things that are good about America. There's people coming from all over the world to the United States as a beacon of hope, yet we're producing students that hate the country, and that's a problem. And I think that is affecting achievement gap in particularly African American students.
All right. Another question, kind of going back to what Linda brought up. District 5 is home to some of Louisville's most racially and ethnically diverse communities, and it's also home to a sizable population of students who are learning English as a second language. If elected, how would you advocate for those students and the services they need?
Number one, I would go for an ESL equity policy because I feel like they've been left out of the equity conversation. They're quiet and they don't have an advocate at the district level, which is something that we need. We need a strong advocate for our ESL population. So I would want to begin with trying to create that equity policy for them because their needs are so different. And right now we have one newcomer academy that deals with our middle school and high school, but we need another newcomer academy in addition to that one, as well as one that deals with kids that are third, fourth, and fifth grade, so that we can begin to support these kids early and allow them to grow and learn the language as well as the content right along the way they're supposed to. We need more staff. We just hired 42 ESL teachers and 11 interpreters, but that's the beginning. I mean, this is not the beginning of what we've done, but that's just the beginning of the need for what we need to add to them. Our ESL population is quiet, and lots of times even the parents don't speak up and advocate for their own kids. So we have to be careful and not allow them to slip into the background. Well, that would be what I would begin with on
Okay.
Olivia.
Yeah, that's good. Greg.
I think the ESL population is an amazing population. It shouldn't be looked at as a disadvantage all the time, because they're actually years ahead of Native American-born students, because they're coming there with a language, especially the younger ones. I was at a yard sale in my neighborhood over in Yorktown North, and I was just shopping around, and there was a little girl from, I want to say it was Mexico. I think that's what she told me, and her mother. And the little girl was a JCPS student, and her mother didn't speak English. But the daughter was bilingual, because she went to school, and especially younger kids, if they're younger students, they can pick up the language really quick. And so they may be a little behind at the beginning, but they catch up pretty quick. But anyway, the student was acting as an interpreter for one of the residents that was trying to sell the mom something. And that is such an amazing thing to see. So it's not necessarily a liability. It's a liability in learning some of the other subjects, but especially if they're young, they're going to get that quick. For the middle and high school students, a lot of time, because of social reasons, it's a little bit harder for them to learn the language. But yeah, definitely all the resources that we can muster to get those kids speaking English, because that's the key going to be to their academic success. We want them to keep their own language, because there's international trade nowadays. So if you speak fluently 2 languages, you're gold in a lot of industries. So we want to encourage them to keep their language, but we want to give them every resource available to learn English, so they can learn their other subjects in English, because we've got so many languages in JCPS. There's no way we could have teachers teaching all those different in all those different languages. So learning English is essential. Give them the support they need, and don't look at them as a liability. Look at them as a future economic asset for the whole county.
So, I live on Lonsdale. I do a lot of my eating at Save-A-Lot. And I'll be honest with you. There is, like I have done about 1,700, a little over 1,700 homes I've walked door to door to. And so I am really learning just to meet people where they at and where they live. And what I'm seeing is that I'm seeing people who have strong family values. And when I tutor, there was a fellow I was tutoring who was Hispanic, and honestly, I'm dealing with him, I'm dealing with other kids, and he's like flying off the roof. He does great. Honestly, to be honest with you, he's super well behaved, and then you hit that hour, though, he just starts getting hyper. But basically, they are a gift, honestly, and I think that, I do believe in the counseling learning centers. I really do. I think that, if you have individuals, then schools should be able to guide and say, okay, well, we know a place here, we know a place there. Some of this is for a future question, so I guess I'll leave it a little bit at that, but, remind me if you think something's coming up.
Okay. We are actually switching into audience questions. So if you have a question.
Also, I just want to ask, please speak directly into the mic to answer the questions, please, from the audience. That way everyone can hear you real close to the mic.
Okay. Is this to any of them or specific? Okay. I'll just direct it to all of them. I'd like all their opinions. When I was in school, parents were involved in school. I was involved in my kids' school. Schools don't want parents involved anymore. They want to make the decisions. I keep hearing about mental health workers in the schools making decisions about our children. I think people are tired of the school feeling like they have the right to make mental and health decisions for our children. I think that belongs in the home, not in the school, and let them make the medical decisions. So, how do you feel about that?
How do you feel about that? Please, and speak directly into the mic.
Okay. You know, and I think one of the things is like when you use a word and it has a very wide definition, we ought to say, hold on, let's be a little bit more accurate here, because I do believe that there's a line that I think that schools have been crossing, maybe unawares, but they've been crossing over into areas that involve subjects that are metaphysical, moral, certain issues that are part of a parental autonomy. They're not part of the government's usage. You know, I believe that your teacher ought to have as much moral and spiritual authority over your child as your mechanic. You know, they have a specific thing that they are teaching, and when they focus on that, they do incredible. I do think that within that wide definition, we could find things where, okay, you know, maybe these things are going to extremes and we need somebody to help in, especially, let's say, behavioral or something like that. So I think that, you know, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but there's just a lot of potential to go in some directions that I don't think me or many parents are very comfortable with.
We are so blessed to have the mental health counselors that we have in our school, because our kids come to us with such issues, especially in our high schools. We're discovering the suicidal forces that are playing on them, and so in that sense, that's what our mental health counselors deal with, are the kids who've been traumatized by events in their lives, or who have issues that are creating despair. So that's what ours are focusing on. I have not heard any situations where mental health counselors are doing things that parents are objecting to, and parents are involved. As a matter of fact, the parents are involved with the discussions that about their kids, and want the support that the mental health counselors are providing. So I think unless we have some specific examples of where this is happening in our schools, it's kind of hard to make generalizations here. Our mental health counselors perform a tremendous service. I was in an elementary school Monday where the counselor was dealing with a child who has gone through a great deal of abuse, and that person is very much attuned with helping the child and getting the right services for her to be able to cope with her life and to be able to be a functioning, successful person. So I do think you got to be careful about painting everybody with a wide swath here. Some of our kids do need extra support, and we have staff all across the district that is trying its best to provide that for kids so they can have successful lives. Yeah, during the pandemic, when nobody knew exactly what all of this meant for everybody, we did have to make some decisions about based on CDC guidance, which is what we do. We have people on our board who did want to mandate masks, and for me, that was never a consideration. It was always about a recommendation that CDC made. It was not about a mandate, and because I knew we couldn't even enforce mandates, we didn't enforce them from the moment they got on the buses. We didn't enforce them, so it was ridiculous to call them mandates. But in those areas, we do have some members who feel differently and want to do that control, but not all of us want that and did not support that.
Okay, well, I agree with the questioner. I think there needs to be a definite line of separation between certain moral issues and religious issues and medical issues. And the schools should not be doing anything along these lines without first getting the consent of the parent and also keeping the parents informed about what exactly they're doing. There should be nothing hidden from the parents, and everything should be above board and told and explained to the parents beforehand. And of course, they have the right to object. So this goes with different guidance on different issues on sexuality, on issues of shots that are required or vaccinations. I think it's horrendous the way we treated so many of our students and staff, coercing them into getting vaccinations of a vaccine that was untested and unproven. And we're going to still see if there's going to be ramifications down the road because of what we've done. We already know that there's huge psychological ramifications and damage done to our students because of the whole mask mandate and other actions that were taken during COVID. So yeah, we need to have the parents in charge. They're the primary ones responsible for raising their children, and they're entrusting the school and staff to take care of their child and not cause more damage when they drop them off at school.
Thank you. My name's Greg Merja. I live here in Fairdale. My daughter attends Fairdale High School, and I am a 26-year veteran of Jefferson County Public Schools. I'm still in the classroom now. My colleagues are leaving left and right. We are hemorrhaging teachers, and student discipline is the leading issue. Even the collective voice of teachers here, Jefferson County Teachers Association, has said so. If we don't fix this, I'm afraid we're all going to wake up one August morning and not be able to open public schools because we don't have enough staff. It's worse than you might imagine. I have a colleague who's leaving October 1st, and the school year's just started. And we'll probably have people leave in December. So and I've been heartened to hear the candidates address this issue. My specific question has to do with the traditional programs. This current board removed the traditional program's ability to exit kids for behavior. If elected, do you plan to restore that to the traditional schools?
Okay.
Brief.
Okay.
Very brief.
I want to make that an option for every school. So I had two stepkids who went through the traditional program. They graduated from Butler High School. And I remember years ago when I was a substitute teacher, I'd go to Butler High School as a substitute, and it was so different from so many of the other schools because they had a student body there that didn't have to be the brightest bulbs in the box, but they were there and they were compliant and they allowed the teacher to teach. So I got there as a substitute teacher, and the students walked up to my desk and they said, "Okay, Mr. Pacetti, this is what we're doing today. We're going to be working in groups, blah blah blah, and everything." And I was like, "This is like heaven." And when you have disruptive students in the classroom, you can't do that. We're not giving up. I want to emphasize, not giving up on disruptive students, but they need to be separated in some manner from the kids who are actually there to learn, because you as parents send your kids to school to learn, not to deal with all this other stuff going in the classroom.
Yeah. Either one of you.
It is such an advantage for a school to be able to do that, Greg,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why you see better scores at some schools that can be able, they can exit kids based on their grades or their behavior or their attendance. Other schools can't do that, and yet we're all put in the same row of comparing our scores and how we do academically. And so it creates such an unlevel playing field. I mean, when I first got on this board, we had concentrations of advanced kids in traditional schools. We had, even though they weren't labeled, they weren't formally labeled advanced kids, they were the advanced kids. We had concentrations of them in certain schools, and then we had everybody else in the others. And you can't have those schools unless you have the other schools, because you got to have some place to kick them out. You got to have some place that they will go to. So when they put them out, then other schools are dealing with exactly what you're talking about. Why not allow the traditional schools to be able to do the same kinds of things that the other schools do in order to intervene and support kids to keep them in that building instead of just dismissing them? I think we're beyond that. I believe it's a way unlevel playing field, and I think it's about time that we held everybody accountable for trying to teach all of our kids. And if kids want into magnet schools, which is they want in there for particular reasons, we're going to create magnet schools based on interests. And they will be diverse, and they will be based on the interest of the kids, and they will be by lottery, and they will not be able to be exited from there because their grades aren't good.
That's more than enough.
Yeah.
More than enough. Yeah. Matt, you can answer, but briefly, please.
I think I got it, but I will say that the only thing about traditional schools, I hated having to give up blue jeans. I'll be honest, I just hated it. I hated giving up blue jeans.
Microphone.
No, but seriously, in general, you do see a lot more discipline and a lot more behavior and stuff out of the traditional system, so I appreciate it. And generally, I think I just reverberate what I said earlier. Go ahead.
We can't really hear you, so if you think
Got to speak in the
Speak
microphone.
into the mic.
Okay, I'm a parent, and I have a large family. I'm a father of 7. My wife and I have 7 kids, and 4 of our kids are in school. And we're very involved parents. But the media, some media outlets say that involved parents are considered domestic terrorists, depending on how engaged you are with the school boards. What is your view on an engaged parent, and how engaged do you really want the parents to be in their students' educational process?
Matt, you
When I,
into the microphone as close as you can.
Am I doing good now?
Better.
All right. When I went to a Jefferson County Public School Board meeting a year ago, I walked in the room a little early, and I heard some of the officers saying, "Oh, don't worry, we're ready to bust some heads." You know, and there was a report over in Virginia, I believe. They were talking about FBI agents getting involved and stuff. This has been very aggressive, and I almost I would tell you, go check it out for yourself, but I don't. You know, I hope it's gotten better, but honestly, no, you don't treat parents, especially, you know, our citizens here, okay, we the people should be the boss. You understand that? They are accountable to us and not the other way around. And so you don't go in anticipating bad behavior and, you know, getting violent or anything like that. You should be welcome. You should be accountable. You should feel great because you just went to be participating with your child's education. That environment is what needs to be promoted. And no, it's not what I had to deal with, and I decided wisely not to ever do that.
Linda.
Well, I'm not sure what situation you're talking about. I know we had a meeting. We had a couple of meetings that were disrupted because we couldn't go ahead with the business portion of our meeting because people didn't want to speak in the way that they needed to in the order that we have. So we welcome speakers. We have 45 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting where we have speakers. And we welcome our parents, and we want to hear their voices, and we want them to serve on committees, and we want them to be a part of our task forces, and we want them to be on SBDM councils. And I think now you can have 3 parents on the SBDM council. We want that parent voice, but we want it at a meeting in a way that we can hear and understand their issues in an orderly way and through the process that we have. So no, you're perfectly welcome at the meetings. Parents are perfectly welcome, and we want them there. But it's a case of order, and we have to have order in order for us to conduct our business. We can't let anything disrupt that business. But I've not seen too many. I think we had one other board meeting where it was a disruption from another side. It wasn't one side. It was another side
Poor
that had
number.
disrupted. So, but that has happened to us several times, and it's just we still welcome everybody, and I have no idea why anybody would say that.
I could give a big rebuttal, but I'll just be quiet.
Yeah, just go to Greg.
Okay, first of all, with the questioner, I came from a family with 7 children, so I've got 3 brothers and 3 sisters, so I don't know how you get to all the different school activities to begin with 7 kids. So good luck with that. But as far as teacher involvement, or excuse me, parent involvement, I think the disruptions that were mentioned are a result of the school board not listening to parents. There was a vast undercurrent of parents who were furious about not being listened to, especially with masks and all the contrary policies and positions that were, that were going on during that time. So people were upset, and rightly so, that their kids weren't being educated. Long before the school system finally realized that parents were shouting and screaming that their kids weren't learning, that Zoom classes weren't worth anything, and that wearing masks were stunting the mental health and growth of students. So that's the reason. As far as student or parent involvement, I would love to have more teachers in schools. I think a good program would be, I don't know, I saw this one program on the news where they had dads come in, and the dads came in and greeted the students every day, and the dads walked the halls. That's what we
Greg,
need more
we're going to
student
cut you
involvement
off.
as well.
Yeah,
This is a question predominantly for Ms. Duncan, but all 3 of you. But we're very concerned about the pornographic books that are found in our schools, and there are many schools and there are many books. Ms. Reynolds, maybe it's Dr. Reynolds, who is the head of the JCPS libraries, seems to be in favor. Actually, she doesn't seem to be. She stated that she's in favor of keeping these books, of which the one that's in the limelight right now is called Genderqueer, but there are many. And she seems to be in favor of keeping this book and these books in our school libraries. So my question would be, how does the school board feel about this? Has there been discussion about it? And can you give us any feedback about that, specifically to you, but also to all 3?
Well, the only thing I can tell you, it's not, it doesn't come to us as a decision. It's an SBDM council decision. And so when a parent finds a book that's objectionable, then the parent first goes to the teacher, and then if the teacher doesn't give a satisfactory answer for why they're reading that, then it goes to the principal, and then the principal gives it, and then it goes to the SBDM council, and the SBDM council reviews. So the selection of the materials has been a responsibility of the SBDM councils. And for me, personally, it would be something that absolutely I would not want in the library. I think pornographic material, it's not for anybody. I don't think whether it's a gay pornography or straight pornography, it's still pornography, and it doesn't belong in the library. That's my personal opinion. But we have a process that we try and use, that when a parent finds something objectionable, they can follow that process and allow that, or that book then will be removed. And we have a lot of principals that went ahead and I think they checked their libraries and went ahead on their own volition and took those out. So it was a personal thing for them, but we have a process, and it's not an issue that comes to the board. It goes to the SBDM council.
Greg.
This is probably an issue that should go to the board, because some of the things, and I've seen some of the books, and there's not anything that I would not be comfortable having put in front of my child. Because remember, the parents are still responsible. These are underage people. You'd leave the parents to make the adult decisions. And I think in a lot of cases, we've got actually teachers out there who are grooming children to different sexual behaviors that the parents are not comfortable with.
All right, Matt.
This material is not just pornography, it involves children. And there are some laws that are being broken, especially transportation of this to a children's facility. And I have heard a lot of hot potato. I've heard people say, oh, no, this is the state, this is the councils. I will look at it, but I believe on your questionnaire, and if I'm wrong, then I'll say that I'm wrong, but if not, I believe you put it in the hands of Marty Polio in that questionnaire. Now, I will do everything in my power to make sure this stuff gets out, okay, that basically the law is followed and that this is not put in the hands of children or anyone else on the school premises. You know, as I said, this is criminal activity. It is encouraging criminal activity.
You want one more?
Hello, it's just a follow-up. The American Association of School Boards sent a letter to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Merrick Garland then requested that the FBI send out guidance to all FBI field offices to look for domestic terrorism in these school board meetings. So that's where that comes from. And this question was for Linda. Are you aware of that?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't a local thing. It was a national sent out to all FBI field offices. So I would just like your comment, are active parents domestic terrorists? And that's what that guidance was put out. Do you believe that?
No, absolutely not. And
okay. I would just like everyone to answer.
Our Kentucky School Board Association withdrew from the National School Board Association, and we withdrew with them. That we were not supportive of that at all. So, no, I was not supportive of that.
Okay, not supportive of it at all. You know, parents, as I said a couple times, they are in charge of the children. They're in charge of the morals of the children and their upbringing, and they need to be involved, and their voices need to be heard.
And generally, this should be a local law enforcement, local school issue, not a national issue. So generally, if it's outside of that, if there are people that are criminally violent at the meeting and stuff, then obviously law enforcement has to get involved in all these kind of threats. But this is something that should be handled by our local authorities and not a national group.
All right. Well, that is time. We've actually taken up a few more minutes than we anticipated. So I'd like to thank all of you for being here, our candidates, the library for allowing us to be here. And I think that's it. Have a good night.